Hello everyone, I hope all of you are doing great. In today's presentation, we'll be looking at the various tools that a researcher has at their disposal when they're collecting data to validate or support their research papers or their research studies. Now, the very knowledge of these tools and how to use them and what tools to use based upon what study is being carried out is very important because it ultimately impacts the end result, the paper that you send for publication. So, we'll be looking into that. My name is Fasih Baig. I'm the student in the Faculty of Education at University of Sindh, and this project was assigned to me by my teacher, Professor Amjad Ali Arai. So let's proceed. So before we move any further, we must understand what data collection really means. So it's a process of gathering and analyzing relevant information that offers solutions to whatever research questions you might have set to begin with before coming down to collect the data and to write up your research paper. So the data that you collect is in order to answer these questions or to support the argument that you're making in your study. So simply put, it's a process of gathering all the relevant and specific information that supports and or fuels your research project. And so when it comes to the types of data collection techniques, we have two: the primary and the secondary data collection technique. The primary data collection technique can be further divided into two parts. It's either qualitative or quantitative. We'll come back to it in a bit. Before that, you must understand that if your field of study or the research that you're carrying out is on a topic for which very little or no literature is available, so whatever data you collect will be classified as primary because it's new, it's not pre existing, it's fresh. So the qualitative, the primary data collection technique refers to every research data that does not involve a number or a mathematical calculation to deduce it, to calculate it, but rather it is based on the non-quantifiable elements like the feelings or the emotions of the researcher or the population being researched on. So basically, an open-ended questionnaire is primarily used to uh, gather qualitative data wherein people can express their opinions, their feelings, their viewpoint, their perspective about anything that you're researching on. So in other manners can be an online discussion on an online forum, focus group, in-depth interview. So all of these data collection techniques are classified as qualitative, and basically you're researching in something new for which no or little literature is already existing. The quantitative one, on the contrary, is where you are expected to present in numbers and require a mathematical calculation to deduce. So an example would be a questionnaire with close-ended questions. Now, because you have, it's basically subjective. It's not objective. You're not looking for people's opinions or their feelings about a product. You're basically looking at facts and figures. So basically, a face-to-face interview, or by mail, or by phone, or an online, you know, targeted interview can be, classified as quantitative. Secondary data collection, the other hand, is referred to as the gathering of second-hand data. Data collected by an individual who is not the original producer of that data, the original collector of that data, but we are basically just using the information because it's relevant to whatever you are researching on currently. But we have to be careful when using secondary sources of data collection because in order to incorporate them into your research project, you must provide proper citations and references to the original people who have collected the entire thing. But in terms of ease, it is much less expensive and very easy to collect when compared to the primary data selection. So now we'll look at why it is important to be careful when collecting data and presenting it in a proper and orderly fashion. So here are a few reasons. A key reason for collecting data, be it either through quantitative or qualitative method, is to ensure the validity of the research topic or the research project entire, which must showcase that the researcher hasn't deviated from the research topic or the research questions that they might have set out initially to begin with. Furthermore, The correct use of appropriate data collection methods will reduce the likelihood of errors and will make your results or the results of the research topic in line with the data that is being presented. So the final chapter is in tune with the preceding chapters. It's very important to maintain that consistency. Furthermore, it will also minimize the risk of errors in decision making on behalf of the researcher, so they do not end up making only opinions or value judgments, but you know presenting with relevant data with facts and figures to support their argument, support the research. Also, data collection saves the researcher a lot of time and a lot of precious funds that would otherwise be misspent if the researcher lacks a deeper understanding of the topic or mishandles the subject matter. Also, if your subject is quite new, it something out of the ordinary, so you must be careful that you support the research, your entire research with relevant and sufficient data to back your argument. Otherwise, your research project might not be accepted by the academic or intellectual community. So you have to be very careful that you make use of the data collection appropriately and accurately. Next, we will be seeing what we mean by data collection tool, and we'll be also be looking at a few examples of various data collection tools that are available for any researcher to use. Now, a data collection tool is any means by which a researcher collects relevant information to include in the research paper. It can include all sorts of devices or instruments such as case studies, checklists, online surveys, questionnaires, or interviews, whatever the researcher finds appropriate in relation to whatever the study is being carried out. So whatever technique or whatever means the researcher decides to choose is the data collection tool that he or she is using. So the first data collection tool that we're going to be discussing is an interview, which is a face-to-face conversation between two individuals with the sole purpose of collecting information that is relevant to the research or the study being carried out. Uh, it can interview can be of three types: structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. Now, to not complicate things unnecessarily, I would just explain these three types as structured being interview where all the questions are pre-planned. You do not deviate from that. You only go in, you ask the question that you have already decided, and you get the response from response and feedback based on those questions only. Semi-structured is where some of the questions are pre-planned, but some of the questions you ask on the spot. You decide as a researcher that should be included to make your information more relevant. Whereas the unstructured form of interview is completely spontaneous. You do not have anything in plan, and you just you know think about what questions you would be asking the research sampling population that you're researching on. What you would be asking those people, the respondents, then and there. When you're talking with. Now, for collecting data through interviews, here are a few devices or tools that you can use to easily collect data. You probably just simply want to record the audio, so you may use audio recorder. You might use a digital camera wherein you want to use images for your research project, or you might want to use a camcorder wherein you also want to incorporate both audio and video to better inform your decisions or better support your research project. Next, we have questionnaires, which is the process of collecting data through an instrument consisting of a series of questions and you know with prompts to receive a response from the individual they are being administered to. These can be in online form or simply written down on papers. It's important to note down here that questionnaire is quite different from a survey. So survey is something larger, which incorporates a lot of questionnaires inside of it. So it's important to have that clarity. But some of the advantages of questionnaires is that it can be easily administered to a very large number of people and it's very cost effective. Furthermore, it's easy to answer as well as easy to evaluate the results from the questionnaires and incorporate them into your research. But some of the drawbacks of using a questionnaire is that uh, you know m- maybe the people, the respondents that choose to answer the questionnaire aren't being completely honest, or maybe the questionnaires isn't producing accurate data, because it is qualitative in the end. It's a qualitative method, so it's not nothing to it's got nothing to do with numbers or anything. It's only got everything to do with people's opinions and the perspective. So it's really tricky to get a very pre-accurate picture from a questionnaire alone, that is. Another tool of data collection is observation. Observation simply means you're collecting data on an information or maybe an idea through looking at something through observation. So it's you create like a fictionalized or a small scale scenario wherein you put some participants, you offer them to participate in that, and you record the results of and the outcomes of that activity. So also it's easy to administer, and it can provide greater accuracy of results coming out of it in comparison to a questionnaire. But in the you know as a drawback of to it, it's like it's pretty expensive to actually set up the scenario and get the people to actually participate in that activity and get a more accurate result. So it's something the researcher needs to be mindful of. You can have a lot of techniques when it comes down to observation. Two of them are mostly used. That is, either you make a checklist which state a specific criteria and allows the researcher to gather information and make judgments about what they should know in relation to the outcomes, or maybe a direct observation is more accurate based upon the study being carried out, which will be like the observational study method of collecting evaluative information. So the evaluator or the person that is making the observation watches the subject that the observation is being or the research is being carried out on, and you know just records whatever they observe, whatever they find interesting or relevant to the research. Further, we have focus group, which is the exact opposite of quantitative research, and which involves numerical based data. This data collection method focuses more on qualitative research, and it falls under the primary category, which we discussed a couple of slides back. And it's also data collected based on the feelings and opinions of the respondents. The research involves asking open-ended questions to a group of individual, you know usually ranging from 6 to 10 people, and they provide their feedback. So information obtained through a focus group is usually very detailed, and it's a cost-effective method compared to one-on-one interviews where you have to focus your entire activity on just one person. Over here, you got a group of people answering your questions, or answering or providing the valuable feedback to fuel your research literature. But still it also have a few drawbacks, like for example prejudices or biases may come into play, because at the end of the day people are expressing their own opinions, so they can be prejudiced among something that might upset your or might not be relevant to your research project. And it's also a bit difficult in trying to assemble a group that it's ready to work together with each other. So it's a bit tricky. So you need to be mindful of that as a researcher. Also, a focus group can be organized in a couple of ways. The two most prominent or most popular ones are the two-way and the dueling moderator. Two-way is where one group watches another group answer the questions posed by the moderator as in the researcher maybe, and after listening to what the other group has to offer, the group that was listening are able to facilitate, uh, more discussion and could potentially draw different conclusions. So you have a pretty varied response out of the focus group activity. And the dueling moderator is where there are two moderators who, simply contradict each other. So one is in against, or one is in favor, and the main positive, and it's some sort of like gets people to discuss, to talk on two different perspectives and get a more varied and a more rich sort of like feedback from the entire activity, makes it more valuable and more fruitful in the end. So the next on the list of tools to be discussed in this presentation are the rating scales, which is defined as a close-ended type of survey question. Used to represent the respondent's feedback in a comparative form for a specific particular a feature or maybe a product or a service. So it's one of the most established question types for online and offline surveys. So where survey respondents are expected uh, to rate attribute or feature. Like for example, you might have come across a few surveys where they ask you how you feel about something. Do you agree with it? Are you neutral or undecided about something? Or if you feel strongly about it, how strong do you feel? So you're basically rating out your feelings and the intensity to which you feel towards something. So researchers use this rating scale when they intend to associate qualitative sort of measure with the various aspects with something. So generally the scale is used to evaluate the performance, uh, the skills, basically. I mean, it's yes, stuff like this. So you can rate out their performance on a scale. You could just put it so the decision, well informed decisions could be made. And when it comes to the type, so it's like a variant of the popular multiple choice question. So and there are very a few types of rating scale, like the graphic one, wherein the answers on a scale of 1 to 3 or 1 to 5, like Likert scale, something sort of like that. Then you have numerical rating scale. You've got descriptive one is where each answer is elaborately explained for the respondent. So and for that you have to associate a numerical value of how far do you agree with it or how strongly you disagree with it. So it's a activity based upon how people feel about different stuff, whatever you're researching on. And finally we've got simply the tests. um, it's because as they conduct the research studies, educational researchers attempt to obtain measures of characteristics that are often considered subjective and very difficult to assess, such as personality, or someone's motivation, level of motivation, their efficiency, or even maybe their morale. So their tests come into play because they are the measurements that provide important information at the various points in the entire research cycle. So you can it also helps you to associate numerical values and to gauge an important understanding about exactly where things that you can't easily associate a number with. So you can, an example might include a simple math test for students who are about to enroll in a new class. So you're trying to ascertain where they're standing, or maybe it can be something as important or serious as people entering into a new health program, and you're trying to ascertain what the health status was at the beginning and what they were at the end. So tests really help where you cannot quantify something, and you're based upon things about having a sort of like an examination to reach the results that you're looking for, and then use them to represent it in your research paper. Well, that wraps up this presentation. Thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions or any feedback regarding this presentation, please note that that will be very valuable for me. And just simply feel free to get in touch on this email address. Thank you once again for your time. Take care. Bye bye.